Phoebe, I wanted to learn a little bit more and just give the audience sort of a broad sense of some of these different day-to-day barriers. I know that I personally feel just so deeply offended by this that I mention it on this show almost every chance I can. But at least one survey from 2015 of almost 30,000 trans adults found that some 8% of all trans adults reported having either kidney or a urinary tract infection in the last year because of avoiding bathrooms, because of not feeling like they had safe and comfortable access to a bathroom. And that kind of day-to-day thing just drives me nuts. I wanted we talked a little bit about applying for jobs, but I was curious about military service and a number of other sort of like regular life things. What can you share with us?
So some of the day-to-day things that people may not know about is like in the United States, you have the selective service, which is the hangover from when the draft was.
Sure.
And it's a requirement if you are assigned male at birth to sign up for the selective service at the age of 18 and stay on until you're 26. And it doesn't matter if you're transitioning. It didn't matter when there was the transgender ban on members of the military. If you were assigned male at birth, you had to sign up for the selective service. And if you didn't do it, you couldn't access federal grants, you couldn't access certain jobs, you couldn't access certain benefits from the federal government. And the madness was, if you were assigned female at birth, it didn't matter, even if you had changed your birth certificate before you turned 18, you were not allowed to sign up for the selective service. And that can cause some problems, because if you're presenting yourself as male and you've got male identification and you're applying for certain things and they then check you on the selective service database and you don't appear, you can be denied access to what I've just mentioned. So what you have to do is, if you were assigned female at birth and you now have male identification, you change your birth certificate, etc., you have to apply for a letter from the selective service to say, I'm exempt, which is another barrier that you have. But some of the more day-to-day and more mundane things is this toxic culture. It can be difficult to even walk down the street sometimes. And it's one of the things people take for granted, driving your car and walking down the street. Road rage. I experienced road rage once from another motorist because they thought, for whatever reason, that it was fine to hurl transphobia and to harass me on the road. Just because I was driving my car down the street.
Sure.
And it is so challenging sometimes when all you want to do is to just get on with life. I'm going to go quite personal here. I had somebody taken to court once who was stalking and harassing me simply because I was trans. And it was horrendous to go outside my own front door. And it ended up in court, and there was a special screen put in place. But the very first question that I was asked by this counsel for this person was, why are you a T-slur? In court.
And yeah, and I mean, how did that scan? What was the reaction? I mean, was there immediately a bunch of objections and like the whole thing was thrown out? And
the judge turned around and said, "Please watch your language," but the question stood. And I had to explain why I had transitioned. And was I doing? And the next question: are you doing this for fun? Are you enjoying having my client prosecuted? It's like,
what?
Are you serious?
Yeah, who came to this court to have a good time today?
Wow.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. Nate, I don't want to put too much pressure on you to share your own experiences or to put those, apples next to somebody else's oranges. But I'm reminded of a lot of things that I've heard Dan Savage say with regards to transphobia and homophobia, and how homophobia in particular is sort of the like little creepy little brother to misogyny, and that it does kind of tie into these ideas of like the patriarchal male, and then
Yeah.
transphobia being like the really creepy cousin. As you're hearing all these stories and we're talking about sort of like the trajectory and how it's changed, do you feel like there has been maybe more acceptance around the gay community as the anger has sort of settled somewhere else? Do you feel like the progress that's been made against homophobia is at play here? I mean, what can you tell us?
I absolutely do think that there's been a lot of progress as far as homophobia goes. If I think back to when I was in high school, and gay was just used in the pejorative, just in general, oh, that's gay,
Sure.
and we still get that. I still hear it today, but it's
I
not.
mean,
It
Smear the
it
Queer
seems
was a game that all of my friends played all the time. I had no idea what a queer was, but I knew that that was the person that you were supposed to be violent towards.
And it
right.
reminds me of what a friend said. You can have an FAG drag.
Mm,
Yeah.
They were alluding to a lynching.
sure.
Yeah, but I do think that things have gotten a lot better very quickly for the gay community specifically. And when I say that, when I say very quickly, I mean, over the space of say
Sure.
20 years. But we're talking, like less than a generation, right? And I hope and I think that the same thing is going to happen with this trans panic. I think that it's gonna, those of us who actually have half a brain and aren't basing their opinions on what they saw on Fox News or what President 45 happened to say last week. I think is that sort of those, the zealots are always going to be zealots, but it's just the cries of a dying animal.
Mm.
The death throes of a wounded Republican snake, and I do think that it is going to get better. I hope it is. What do you think? I mean, listen to just consider my story from what's turning me on, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
you've got
Yeah.
conversations like
That
that
feels affirming.
happening. Yeah, and that happens on job sites. Like the people that I work with, most of them know that I'm gay. The ones that don't, it just simply hasn't come up yet in conversation. But
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure they know and just don't want to say anything about it because I'm the one in charge sometimes. But yeah, I really do see a lot of acceptance, and it's not like it's a big deal anymore.
Mhm.
It's the biggest oh my god, like that I get is because I don't really fit the archetype, the gay archetype. Like I'm
Sure.
not a Britney Spears fan, and I don't have the affectations
Hey,
and
what's wrong with
blah blah.
Britney?
I'm just okay. I do have several Britney songs on my phone.
Okay, well,
Okay, I
that's a
will
relief because
admit
there's nothing wrong with good old bit of Britney.
there's nothing wrong with Britney. Actually,
Not that
funny
there's
you should
anything wrong
mention.
with it. Nothing
Not
wrong
that
with Britney at all.
Yeah, that Seinfeld joke has aged poorly. But what was the song that came? Oh yeah, "Lucky" came on my iPhone as I was driving home from work today. You know that song? She's so lucky. Anyway. I
That's
don't
when we
want to
get
get caught.
demonetized,
I
Nate.
know I don't want to get sorry. And
Stop that now.
and my apprentice starts singing along, and we got into how great Britney was. So I feel like in a lot of ways, especially for the younger generation, I
Mhm.
think this whole misogynistic man's man in a man's world thing, I think it's dying,
Yeah.
and the sooner the better.
Well, Phoebe, what about you? I mean, whether we're talking about like bathrooms or the government, doctors, health clubs, like all of those kinds of things, despite this like very loud backlash that we're seeing right now, does it feel to you like a death rattle, or do you feel like we're actually losing meaningful ground?
It feels like that there is a lot of complete and utter nonsense being spewed by an ever decreasing circle of nonsense mongers in this world.
Sure.
And the nonsense mongers are getting more nonsensical because you just have to scroll through Twitter. And I saw somebody had put something about not going to give any spoilers on this film, but it was great. And then this person starts ranting transphobia, and then someone's like, "What are you talking about? They were giving a film review. What does it matter?" And it does get to the point of where they say, "Well, I'm protecting this, that, and the other from this." And it's like, have you got any evidence for that? And particularly in the UK, court case after court case is bought by these groups that are opposed to trans people, virulently opposed to them. Like, and there was one that goes, "I think that we should stop all trans women as a matter of course." And a judge said, "Your arguments are not based in law." It's nonsense. And they brought it to court and they'd raised all this money for it from these people. And the judge just laughed at them. And this is what you hear more and more and more. But the problem is you do get the occasional court case that they win. Like there was a court case that banned under 16s from accessing hormone blockers without going to court. That was then overturned. But they made a lot of money out of that. But previous to that, there was also another court case where they tried to say that trans women shouldn't be housed in women's prisons. And they presented all these statistics. The judge went, "Well, this is rubbish, complete nonsense." And it does feel that there is a lot of very voluminous, loud people talking about things that they don't really understand. So I'll have people, because I've got some legal training, that will start shouting the law at me, and I go, "That's not what the law says. The law doesn't say that." And they say, "Well, yes, it does." No, because you're only reading the black letter law. You've got to read the case law as well that goes with it, and the regulations that go with it. And there's a lot of people out there who are particularly virulently transphobic. They write books, they have media tours, and so on and so on and so on, that don't have a blind bit of clue what the law actually says. Ask the majority of people who are opposed to reforming how you change your birth certificate in the UK, and they won't know what the underlying legislation actually is. They've just heard, "I need to stop this." And then they just run around with it, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they don't know why they're talking about it. It's horrendous. It's ridiculous. It's painful. It's awful to live through it. But it can't carry on like this, because they're going to run out of people going, "Hang on a minute, what on earth are you talking about? This is complete and utter dog shite that you're spewing here, and it smells really
more and
bad."
more irrational and ungrounded.
Yeah.
I mean, are there any like particular conspiracy theories or other madness that you see on the rise right now? I mean, obviously we hear a lot of irrational thought.
I don't often do this, but I have Jewish heritage, and a lot of the conspiracy theories are that people like myself and other trans people are all funded by a great big Jewish conspiracy, and a Jewish cabal is funding all this, and is transing children, and turning the frogs gay, and it's like, oh, good
When
grief.
do the space lasers come into it, Phoebe?
When we have when Queen Elizabeth II finally decided she's going to reveal that she's a lizard queen and is going to live forever.
Oh, okay. That's when the space lasers are going to massively convert. Right. Okay. Got it.
But the level of anti-Semitism that is being folded into the anti-trans debate is really quite scary. As somebody who used to be very religiously Jewish and has a lot of Jewish heritage, to be attacked as a trans woman and as somebody of Jewish heritage, and to hear a lot of ridiculous conspiracy theories like, "Oh, have you noticed that person A, B, C, and D, who all happen to have Jewish surnames and happen to have a lot of money, are somehow connected with this global transhumanist conspiracy where we're transing an entire generation to create immortal, infertile people who are without any gender. And it's just like, are you listening to what you're actually saying? But there are people who are selling books, writing books on this and going, the trans agenda and the trans conspiracy, funded by Jewish people. And it's like, what?
I didn't see that subtitle on Abigail Schreier's book, but yeah, I brought that up. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but you must be.
The one I'm familiar with in the UK is by Helen Joyce. It's called Trans, and it's just basically a load of different conspiracy theories to basically say Jewish people are causing trans people.
It's
it's amazing
like
how
red letters
so
and
many
dripping blood, like a Stephen King movie.
A little bit,
That's what I'm seeing in my head.
It's
Sorry,
2022. I'm just trying to figure out how the Jews are still funding every bad thing that's ever happened to conservatives. That's still a mystery to me.
It's all George Soros' fault.